From the most trusted names in local news, KDPG Sunday Edition.
Good morning and welcome to the KDPG Sunday Edition. I'm Stacy Smith. Americans seem more divided than ever about racial issues after the deaths of 5 Dallas police officers, 3 additional officers wounded, and a number of civilians wounded as well on July the 7th. The sniper who targeted his victims, a U.S. African-American veteran of the war in Afghanistan, admitted that he wanted to kill white people and was angry over the separate shooting deaths of 2 black men, one in Baton Rouge and the other in St. Paul, Minnesota. Both of those victims were stopped and then shot and killed by police. At memorial services for the Dallas shooting victims last Tuesday, 2 American presidents, Republicans and Democrats, people of all races and religions came together to seek healing for their city. Danielle Nottingham of CBS was there.
5 seats remained empty to honor each of the fallen officers at the memorial service in Dallas. Dallas Police Chief David Brown introduced President Obama, who expressed his condolences to the families and the entire Dallas community.
We're here to honor the memory and mourn the loss of 5 fellow Americans, to grieve with their loved ones, to support this community.
President George W. Bush, who lives in Dallas, also paid his respects.
With their deaths, we have lost so much. We are grief-stricken, heartbroken, and forever grateful.
The officers were killed Thursday by Army veteran Micah Johnson, who opened fire during a peaceful Black Lives Matter protest.
There's no greater love than this, that these 5 men gave their lives for all of us.
I'm here to insist that we are not as divided as we seem. And I know that because I know America. I know how far we've come against impossible odds.
Before the service began, applause erupted when some of the injured officers made their way into the auditorium. 9 officers and 2 civilians were also injured in the attack. Danielle Nottingham at CBS News, Dallas.
This morning on the KDPG Sunday Edition, the troubled state of racial relations in America, the divide between police and members of minority communities over some police enforcement strategies, and a search for solutions to these long-term problems. Later in this broadcast, you will meet Pastor Clayton Walker from the Mustard Seed Church in Monroeville, and you will hear his thoughts. But we begin with 2 other leaders with a special perspective on civil rights and the impact of violence on the African-American community. Dr. Todd Allen is a professor of communication studies at Grove City College in Mercer County. He is founder and executive director of the Common Ground Project, in which he takes students to the sites of famous civil rights events in American history, from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, and elsewhere. Dr. Allen also hosts community dialogues on race and reconciliation. Also with us is Reverend Glenn Grayson Sr., pastor of the Wesley Center AME Zion Church in Pittsburgh's Hill District. Reverend Grayson's son, Jerron, an 18-year-old student at Hampton University in Virginia, was shot and killed in 2010 while on a break and visiting friends at a party near California University of Pennsylvania. David Tribben, the executive editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, is away this week. John Allison, the editorial page editor of the Post-Gazette, joins us for this morning's discussion. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us this morning on the KDPG Sunday Edition. It's been a very tough couple of weeks as far as relations in this country go, and perhaps one that is forcing people to take a look at things. And when people do take a look at it, there was a new CBS New York Times poll which indicates that 69% of Americans now view race relations as bad, which is 1 point higher than the previous all-time high reached in 1992 after the LA riots following the Rodney King verdict. So 69% of Americans now view race relations as bad. We just heard the president, though, in Dallas say that we're not as divided as we seem. Your take on this, Dr. Allen?
I normally agree with our president, on a lot of things. But when he said that line that we're not as divided as it seems, I had to disagree. We are quite divided, and we've been quite divided for a long time now. You mentioned the earlier poll that was taken, but I think it goes back even further. I'm reminded early on in this administration when then Attorney General Holder said, when it comes to discussing matters of race, we're a nation of cowards. And he actually caught a lot of hell for saying that. But I think it's very true. We are quite cowardly sometimes when it comes to dealing significantly with matters of race.
I want to make it clear that your son was not killed by police officers. He was killed at a separate incident involving other youths involved in this. But your take on this as well.
I tend to agree with Dr. Allen. There's definitely no question that we seem more divided than together. And I think social media is exposing it in a way like never before. So I think it always existed. But the fact that now you can live stream it and see it face to face, the two killings right in front of your face as you picked up your phone and looked on Facebook, it was devastating. And so it is just real in our faces, and it's more realistic than it was when it was hidden.
Well, then you raise a good point, and this maybe is what you're saying, but and you have said that. Is it more division now, or is it about the same as it was? You're a student of the civil rights movement.
Yeah, I don't think that the division is necessarily greater or more, but as Reverend Grayson said, we're seeing it more. It's more in our face, and then quite frustrating, and causes one to lose hope. But I want to be clear: I've not abandoned hope at all in this situation, but it does become quite discouraging.
Picking up on what Eric Holder said about that we are cowardly discussing race, what would be courageous? What steps should we all take to not be cowardly?
Well, for me, sometimes we say, a lot of statistics say that Pittsburgh is the most livable city in the country, one of the most, number one, but just most livable for who? Mm-hmm. And so if we were honest with transparency, I don't know if we would say, if we were really truthful, if it was really most livable for everyone, for black, white, rich, I don't know if it's most livable for everyone. For some people, it is a phenomenal city in terms of college, universities, museums, and the culture enrichment, but for others, it's foreign. It's like you're in the city and benefit very little from any of the wonderful things that are part of this great city.
All right, why?
Well, I have a friend who says that oftentimes we don't want to address these issues of the past because for African Americans sometimes it's too painful, and for whites it's too shameful. But we've got to come to realize this is our collective and shared past, and that if we're ever going to have a better future with one another, that we've got to own up to the sins of the past, and those sins being both individual as well as institutional. And I think that's what Reverend Grayson alludes to. I was going to say the same thing. I remember hearing a lot of those polls about Pittsburgh and this region being most livable, and I often have to scratch my head and say most livable again, for whom?
We have to fight for affordable housing. As new housing is being built, we have to fight for equality in the educational system. It's just not there, and so there's a disparity in this city.
Well, some will say, and I'm going to bring their point of view, that literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars have been funneled into programs to try to help people in minority communities, not just here in Pittsburgh, I'm not saying that, but across the country. And what you're saying is it's not working.
Well,
or is that what you're saying? I should have phrased it that way.
I was going to say, I wouldn't necessarily say, again, that, things are, not working per se, but, they say in the civil rights movement that freedom is a constant struggle. And that's really what the Black Lives Matter movement is talking about, is this constant struggle. We like to think as we look at the past, that the past is indeed this very distant sort of memory that we have overcome. We're still in the process of dealing with some things. I mean, if you look historically in our country, we have actually practiced as a society discrimination by law and by custom longer than we practice the ideals of freedom, justice, and equality that we claim to live up to. I mean, for over 300 years, we've practiced discrimination, and it's been only in about the last 60 or so that we are trying to live up to these ideals of freedom, justice, and equality.
Can I bring up the case of the senator from South Carolina who gave these moving speeches, and he pointed out that he was walking through the Capitol one day with his member of Congress pin on. He was stopped.
If I can just can I stop you for a second, because we happen to have his comments, and we're going to show those to you right now. Okay. Oh.
But please remember that in the course of 1 year, I've been stopped 7 times by law enforcement officers. Not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 times in 1 year as an elected official. Was I speeding sometimes? Sure. But the vast majority of the time, I was pulled over for nothing more than driving a new car in the wrong neighborhood or some other reason just as trivial.
We should point out that as Senator Tim Scott, a Republican of South Carolina, so it crosses all party lines without question.
Well, this is great timing because I was pointing to when he goes through the Capitol and they say, are you really a member of Congress? And here's someone who's risen so far. And so you do all the work and spend all the money and all the understanding. But then people have these individual experiences where they say, you know what? Things haven't changed at all. And is that what's creating a really sharp pain?
Senator Scott, in his remarks, echoes what the majority of black men, or at least the majority of black men I know, are familiar with 4 words: you fit the description. And it's not often a flattering and a positive description, regardless of the hard work that you put in, the earned degrees that you have, the titles that you have. You can still be stopped for fitting the description.
Yeah, Philando was stopped because allegedly, according to the officer, he fit the description of a bank robber, and he just looked like the person. He made a comment. He said his nose was wide. So my nose is wide. And so does that mean because my nose is wide that I could be stopped as an African American? I like my nose. I choose not to change my nose or afford a surgery to change my nose. But that was just amazing that stuck with him. And so that's what we talk about, where it's indeed racism. And bringing awareness to the injustice of black people doesn't make me a racist. It only brings light to racism, and that's what we're really here to talk about in many ways.
Well, I think, and I'd like to add to that as well. I know one of my frustrations has been hearing people say, their angst with Black Lives Matter. I was looking at a survey recently as well. What people thought of the civil rights movement some 50, 60 years ago was not flattering. Now we praise it and we say, well, why can't the Black Lives Matter people be in that tradition? Well, to me, Black Lives Matter is an extension of that, and they're not saying only Black Lives Matter. They're talking about the conditions that are going on right now. And I also, would like to add to that, we're not saying that the lives of law enforcement officers don't matter. That is a tough, a dangerous, a difficult job. And I praise people who do that job with honor and integrity. All I know I'm asking for is some accountability when you've got people who are not operating with honesty and integrity.
Question. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us on the KDPG Sunday edition. Reverend Grayson, you're going to stick around. Dr. Allen, thank you. Your insights are quite insignificant. I appreciate what you had to say. And we'll be back when the KDPG Sunday edition continues. The struggle for healing and frustrations in the African-American community over incidents some call racial profiling. Reverend Clayton Walker will join us. It's coming up. Welcome back to the KDPG Sunday edition. Last Sunday, members of the Macedonia Baptist Church in Pittsburgh's Hill District devoted much of their service to prayer for those affected by both the killing of police officers in Dallas and the deaths of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge and Philando Castile in St. Paul. Bob Allen was there as the congregation sought answers and asked for healing in prayers for peace and reconciliation.
The typical worship service at Macedonia Baptist Church in the Hill District. Prayers were spoken for families of black men shot in Minnesota and Louisiana, along with 5 police officers killed in Dallas.
Lord, touch this world, Lord, touch this world. Cover this world in the name of Jesus.
We're heartbroken by the loss of police and by the loss of black lives. We believe that all lives matter.
Pastor Brian Edmonds says it's time to move from lament and anguish to hope and trust. He asked members to write down the names of anyone in need of prayer and encouragement and bring them to the altar.
Maybe you write down the names of police departments in general, law enforcement in general. We want to lay them at the altar.
The pastor blames a form of cancer in these turbulent times that's tearing the country apart.
It's become fear and hatred. It's become racism and discrimination. It's become violence.
Says the cancer continues to spread from one city to another.
One morning we wake up and we're praying for Minneapolis. The next morning we wake up and we're praying for Louisiana. The next morning we wake up
At one point, the lights were turned off and the blinds in the church were closed briefly. It was a reminder that the light will always overcome darkness.
Don't forget, church. And not only did God say, let there be light, but then Jesus said, you are the light.
Bob Allen, KDKA, TV News.
And back with us this morning on the KDPG Sunday edition is Reverend Glenn Grayson Sr., pastor at Wesley Center AMA Zion Church in Pittsburgh's Hill District. Also joining us is Pastor Clayton Walker, senior pastor of the Mustard Seed Church in Monroeville and senior superintendent of the Covenant Kingdom Ministries International. Dr. Walker, thank you for joining us also this morning on the KDPG Sunday edition. You had an opportunity to listen to our first segment.
Yes.
Your thoughts? Do you agree with everything that was said?
I agree with what was said. I can literally see two sides to it, spent decade after decade after decade crying out, this has been happening to us, only to have been shot down. And now that we've come into the age of literally starting from Rodney King in 1991 moving forward, every police interaction being captured on video pretty much. And even with the video, very little seems to happen. You know, so you have this community who now has reached a boiling point of frustration to the point where they are now reacting in the only way they know how. On the other side of the coin, you have a group of people who say, and in many cases rightly so, if we as a community policed ourselves, much of what we see in the news wouldn't be happening. And I tend to agree with both sides of those issues.
And okay, by saying police ourselves, what exactly do you mean?
Well, for instance, there's a policy that actually goes both ways in the police community as well as the black community, talking about no snitching. And what that stems from is a crime can be committed, people can witness the crime, the police ask for witnesses, but nobody will come forward. Not necessarily out of fear of retaliation, but because if I'm a parent and I have to choose between losing my son to the streets or losing my son to the police, I don't know which of those is really the better option. So I'm not really going to say anything. We then try to police it in certain ways, not always the best way, and it just perpetrates a myth that the police are out there to get us. And unfortunately, it's now become reality in a lot of our communities.
You perhaps more than anyone can speak to that.
No question. I think we have a real issue around black-on-black homicides, blue-on-black homicides, and now black-on-blue homicides. It is our reality, and it is daunting and scary. And so we all grieve. I have a brother who's a retired police officer recently in Durham, and my heart went throughout his tenure as an officer. I continue to pray for him. Our hearts bleed. No one should not feel heavy over the loss of 5 officers who lost their lives in Dallas. But the same token, when on social media, we look and see how blatantly so many African Americans lose their lives just for no reason through sometimes overexcited officers who sometimes through racism kind of just see African American men in particularly differently. It is daunting and troubling.
Would it help if there were more African American police officers?
No question. I think diversity helps the whole world, because I think if we really, where I agree with the president is that if we're not that different in many ways if we learn each other. And so because of the lack of diversity, especially in Pittsburgh and other cities of the police force, I worked for years with Penn trying to integrate the police department, where for like almost 12 years there was not one African American or very few African American candidates. It was the Sanders Decree that forced a season of opportunities for African Americans, but it shouldn't take a lawsuit to cause this most of the city to do what I think is fair, equitable, and right.
I went on the internet, which of course can be dangerous as well, but I tried to find the latest statistics, and one was from the Pittsburgh Police Department. This was from 2014, and of the total police department, 13% were African American, 85% were white. In relation to the latest census, which goes back to 2010 that I could come up with, 26% of the Pittsburgh population is African American and 66% is white. So you have a greater number of white police officers than the percentage of the population, and half of the community, of African American community, is being policed by African American police officers.
Worse than that, many of those officers through the Sanders Decree are at retirement age or retiring. If you notice now, especially of the new cadets, a new class of officers who don't look like me, so most of our seniority gives most of the African Americans who are still officers daytime employment, daytime shift. If you study Zone 5, Zone 2, and other zones, the evening shift, it's almost lily white. And again, once again, they come out with sometimes some with lack of training and exposure and sensitivity training, and they sometimes, that's what's scary, make choices or quick reactions because they just don't understand African Americans. Our kids are viewed as older and more dangerous, and we die.
I agree with everything Pastor Grayson said, with one slight difference. I mean, those stats do apply to the city of Pittsburgh, but if you look at cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, where they have not only majority populations, but also majority minority police forces, I don't think it's a race issue all the time. I think a lot of time it's a culture issue within the police community that says, okay, here's our targets that we need to focus on. And you can see where the concentration of policing generally takes place. It's predominantly in the minority communities. By the same token, there are wonderful white police officers out there. I lost my son. My wife and I lost our son in 2008 in West Virginia. We were literally embraced by the entire police community, and they fought for us probably harder, I think, than they would have fought for somebody in their own community to help us get justice. And we got the justice. So I think we have to sometimes be careful how we label policing. I think a lot of times it's not necessarily a race thing. In many cases, it definitely is. But I think there's also a standard within the police community that says, here is how we operate. You need to come in line. And you see that when you see police officers that do engage in bad behavior, but the bulk of the police officers that they work with remain silent.
So it's, excuse me, just a second, John. So it's two points, if I can raise it then, is one, what you're saying is quite similar to what the president said on Thursday night in the town hall meeting, where he said that it's also up to us as citizens, when a police officer is over there doing his job, not to immediately assume that police officer is racist. And he's got a job to do. The other side of the coin, when you're talking about concentration of police officers in certain areas of the city, unfortunately, the crime statistics also show, and I'm just looking at 2014 and the big crimes that were committed would be homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, that sort of thing. White males 648, black males 1,289 as far as arrests go. I mean, there is a disparity there, but there is also more crime that's taking place.
Well, yes and no. I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you put the majority of your policing in a certain community, without a doubt, you're going to have the majority of those crimes resulting in that community. Now, murders, robberies, things like that, just as many white people rob as black people do. Just as many white people kill as black people. 84% of whites were killed by other whites. But we always hear the other stat, 93% of blacks are killed by blacks. So that's not really a balanced argument in that regard. Yes, we do tend to commit, as a per capita, more crime than other races, but it's also, again, if you're looking for the crime, you're going to find it.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are totally out of time. I know, it went too fast for a reason. Thank you. John, I'll be back with some final thoughts in just a moment. John, your thoughts?
What emerged from the attack in Dallas was that police force has been nationally recognized for its achievements and racial parity and good policing. And the only thing that we can hope is that their model gets some more attention.
John, thank you. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back next Sunday morning at 11:30, right after CBS Sunday Morning and Face the Nation, with another KDPG Sunday edition. For John Allison, I'm Stacey Smith. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Bathing at home can be luxurious and safe.